Hello aspirants, welcome to this Sunday's special session. Today we are going to look at the geopolitics of Ukraine-Russia war as well as its impacts on India. Before we start the class, we are going to wait for another 5 minutes. Before we start, I want you all to keep atlas in your hand because the atlas will be very much in use when we are doing this session. So we will wait for another 5 minutes. Until then, please get your atlas. Please keep it in front of your screens as we do this topic here. Hello aspirants. Today we are looking at this topic where we discuss the geopolitics of Ukraine-Russia war and its impact on India. I have mentioned in the comment box, please keep the atlas with you all because the atlas will be very much in handy when we are doing this topic. Firstly, when we look at the issue here, you have to understand what are the major implications. Firstly, before we move on to the implications, you have to understand what is the tension between Ukraine and Russia. See, the tension between Ukraine and Russia is based on two factors. Firstly, it is that Ukraine is strategically important for Russia. How? When we look at the map here, please look at your atlas. Okay, when we look at the map of Ukraine, see, Ukraine before it was divided, it was part of Soviet Union, and after 1991, okay, after 1991, Soviet became an independent country here. When we look at the overall geography of Ukraine, Ukraine is a buffer zone. That is, it is in the middle of Russia as well as most of the European Union countries here. Fine. So, when you look at Russia, Ukraine becomes very important strategically. Okay, Ukraine is very located in a strategical location. So, for Russia, Ukraine is very important. Fine. When we look at the second factor here, second factor talks about the territorial conflict between Russia and Ukraine. What is the territorial conflict between Russia and Ukraine? When we look at the geography of Ukraine, there are few other things that you have to note here. That is the location of Russia. See, when you look at the north of Russia, the north of Russia is completely frozen. As well as when we move to the eastern part of Russia, we have Siberia as well as Alaska. Okay, so what is the problem with Russia is Russia does not have natural ports. Okay, so to access the Black Sea, it has to circumvent Ukraine, or it has to pass through this area that is called as Crimea. Okay, so please remember this point. These points are very important. Okay, as we move along, you will understand why these are important. Then to understand the territorial conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we will briefly look into the political history of Ukraine here. Okay, that is just the three presidents here that we are looking at, starting from 2010. See, when you look at the political parties of Ukraine, there are two types of political parties of Ukraine which are either pro-Russia or pro-West here. Okay, so when we look at 2010, when we start with this era here, 2010 we had this Viktor Yanukovych. See, this president that was elected, he was a very popular president, he was a very popular person in Ukraine, but the problem with this person was that he was previously member of the Communist Party of Soviet Union, and he was pro-Russia here. The story starts in 2010, when in 2010 the president of Ukraine here, that is your Yanukovych, he signed an agreement with the Russian president here, wherein the extension was given for Russia to use the port of Sevastopol here. Okay, to use the port of Sevastopol. This Sevastopol is located in Crimea. In return, what Ukraine got here? Ukraine got 30% cut in the natural gas prices. Okay, so this was the agreement that was signed between Yanukovych and Russia here. But this did not sit well with the Ukrainian people. This did not sit well with US as well. You have to remember that US has always been a natural ally of Ukraine. The Chernobyl leakage that happened, okay, the Chernobyl leakage that happened, even that time US was the natural ally, and even during the time of independence of Ukraine, when there was tensions between Ukraine and Russia, it was US who mediated and allowed the Ukrainian nuclear weapons to be transferred to Russia, as well as US has been providing with lot of aids, and it was the first country to recognize Ukraine's independence. So Ukraine has always been a natural ally of US has always been the natural ally of Ukraine, but when in 2010 Yanukovych signed this agreement, it did not sit well with US here. Later on, what happened is, see, this did not sit well with Ukrainian people, but later on the approval rate of this president also started going down, because the this person here, Yanukovych, he made changes in Article 111 of the Ukrainian Constitution, wherein the presidential term was extended. Okay, it was extended, and this did not sit well again with the Ukrainian people, because this was the same thing that was done in Russia. So the people started believing that we are moving again towards Russia here, but to convince them, okay, to convince them, what happened later on is this Ukrainian president, what he did was he formally began the process to join European Union. Okay, this was the welcome step again. Again, the approval state of the Ukrainian president started increasing, because the people of Ukraine have always wanted to move away from Russia. They always have wanted to move towards the European Union. They always want to move away from the old communist system of Russia and move towards more pro-democratic and pro-capitalist system of the European Union here. But again, the president, whatever he promised that he'll join the European Union, but this promise was taken back in 2014, and later on we had this Maidan Revolution, okay, MADEN, Maidan Revolution that we can call it, that happened in Ukraine here. Later on, the president, what happened is your Yanukovych, he fled away from Ukraine, seeing the revolution, and he went to Russia. And then this Yanukovych was replaced by a temporary president called as Petro Poroshenko. Okay, Petro Poroshenko was the president, and looking at the crisis that happened, okay, the Maidan revolution that started here, it spread to various regions here. It spread to most of the regions, and it became very violent. And the government here started putting orders or making this protest very less violent. They started taking severe police actions. They started firing rubber bullets and all, and this enraged some of the regions here, the regions that are called as the Russian majority regions. Okay, so when you look at the geography of the Ukraine here, you have to understand one thing, that since Russia and Ukraine shares a very close border here, these regions, okay, the regions that is called as Donbas region, when you see the eastern Ukrainian region, this has majority Russian speaking population, as well as in the Crimea as well. Fine. So it is very common, if two countries share a border, the two countries will be the two bordering areas will be having some or the other similar cultural ties. Okay, so these two areas, that is your eastern part, that is your Donbas region, as well as Crimea region, once this Iron Maiden, once your maiden revolution started here, and once the police and the government started to become very harsh on these protesters by firing bullets, rubber bullets and all, what Russia did was, Russia took the advantage of this crisis and it invaded Crimea here. Okay, it invaded Crimea here, and what it did was it conducted something called as referendum. Okay, it conducted referendum in the region of Crimea, and this Crimea was annexed here. Fine, it was annexed in 2014, and later on what happened is, once the Crimea region was annexed, the Russian president at that time, that is Vladimir Putin, he came out and he said that he would be protecting the minorities that are present in this Donbas region, the Donbas region that is present in the eastern Ukraine. So once this statements started coming out of Russia, these areas, okay, the Donbas region, which previously had the Russian majority speakers here, they started establishing their own militia groups here. They started establishing their own militant groups here, and these militant groups were supported by Russia. Fine. And overall, when we look at the recent times, okay, when we look at what happened in the recent times, is that Russia invaded these eastern part, saying that they are here to protect the minorities. They are here to follow peace here. Okay, so this was the context here. Later on, after 2014, this issue went on. Okay, this issue went on. There were several agreements signed, like the Minsk agreement that was signed, where Russia and Ukraine agreed to have ceasefire. Okay, so a lot of things, development started happening, but nothing changed here. Russia still dominated in the Donbas region as well as the Crimea region. Fine, but things changed in 2019. 2019. What happened is that new president was elected, that is Zelensky, the current president of Ukraine. He was elected, and he came out and he said that they are going to implement something called as Steinmeier formula. According to Steinmeier formula, what was the intention here was that in this region, okay, in this region, elections would be conducted, and these regions will be allowed to have self-governing government. Okay, so they would be governing this region based on their own laws. But first, elections should be conducted. But what was the issue here? The issue started again when Ukraine said that the elections will be conducted only if Russia vacates from here. Okay, if Russia vacates this region and lets the election to be non-biased, then only the elections will be conducted. But Russia said that no. Russia said only if the elections will be conducted, then we will evacuate this region. So the tensions, the elections never happened here. The tensions kept on growing, and later on the tensions escalated very much when the current president, okay, in 2020, he decided that they are going to join the European Union here. Okay, so later on, this was decided in October 2021, but in 2022, Russia invaded the Ukraine here in the name that they are going to protect the minorities area of your eastern Ukraine region. Fine. This is the brief political history of whatever happened before the Russian invasion that took place in 2022. So what are the implications on geopolitics? Okay, when we look at what are the implications of geopolitics, firstly and most importantly is your oil prices. Okay, Russia is the highest producer of your natural gas. Russia exports the highest crude oil here, second highest crude oil. It is the third highest producer of crude oil. But due to the war here, the Russian oil has not been the flow of the Russian oil has not increased in the international oil market, as well as the transportation cost from Russia to other parts of the world has increased. This has increased the cost of production in many of the major economies like China. Okay, and it has also had implication on the energy security of your European countries. Why? Because see, for European countries, Russia provides oil and gas supply through the Nord stream. It is one of the biggest pipelines which provides for your natural gas as well as oil reserves. Now that the war has started, and now that the European countries as well as US has been putting a lot of economic sanctions on these oil supplies given by Russia here, the European Union has decided that they are going to cut down completely the supply of Russian gas by 2027. But until 2027, Europe is completely dependent on the Russian oil. Why? Because there is, see, European Union has always been dependent on the Russian oil, and it had no time until now to deliver to develop any of the renewable sources. Fine. So even though for now European Union and European countries like Germany has decided to cut down the inflow of Russian gas here, like the whatever the 100% of the Russian gas is being provided, for now 50% of it is cut by Germany, but the other 50% is provided by countries like US and Qatar to these European countries. But still 50% is a very large volume that is being taken up by these European countries. Fine. Even though the inflow is constant or it has decreased in these European countries, the cost of production is rising, the oil prices are rising in the oil market, and it has had important implications all around the world. It has given rise to inflation. Okay, even in the case of India as well. We will look at the implication of India ahead. Moving ahead, what else are the implications is on your food security. See, these countries, both the countries, that is Ukraine and Russia, both are a majority producer of wheat, barley and maize. Okay, it has been an important issue when it comes to food security. Consider some of the countries like Somalia and Egypt. Okay, these are some of the low middle income countries. Fine. So these countries which need daily bread, daily consumption of wheat. Okay. So when these two food basket countries, when the export of grains has decreased from these two countries, what is happening is it is giving rise to major food concerns. Recently, India requested WTO to allow it to send some of the grains that is being lying in our food corporation of India warehouses. India has requested the WTO to allow us to send the food grains. Why? Because some of the poorer countries here are having a major implication on food security. They are facing a major food crisis. Okay, so India has asked, many other countries have been asking for the WTO. Imagine the countries like low middle income countries. Okay, in Africa, they are facing these food crises because of the low availability of food grains here, as well as Russia. When it comes to Russia is a major exporter of your nutrients here. They are the major exporter of fertilizers here. So this has not only implication on the already produced food grains, it has had the implication on the sowing season as well as harvesting season as well. One more important thing that you have to understand here is that Ukraine by now had to have, it is the sowing season right now in Ukraine. Okay, but due to the war, what is happening is they have not yet harvested the last year's crop only. So these all conditions have put a lot of food crisis. It has given rise to a lot of food security issues all around the world. Okay, nextly here when we look at the next issue that we look at is your agricultural commodity price has risen, okay, because of the low availability of the food grains here. Nextly, when we look at the one more issue that we look at is the migration issue. Okay, so Europe has always had this problem with migration. Okay, previously we had seen how the crisis in the African countries as well as the West Asian countries like in Yemen, Libya, okay, even during the crisis that happened in Iraq. Okay, these all issues have given have risen the migration population. Fine. So now as well, when we see the war that is going on in Ukraine, the Ukrainian population has been flooding to different European countries here. What is the problem with migration is that the migration brings in a lot of issues. Like right now in Europe, there are many far right groups that are in the government, and when the migrants are turning to these European countries, these migrants are being turned away from the country. We already saw one of the issue that happened on the borders of Bosnia and Herzegovina, when authorities, okay, they were not allowing these migrants to enter their countries. Fine. So these are some of the issues that are the three political implications that has had on the geopolitics here. When we look at all these issues, the food, energy and the water security here, these all issues give rise to something called as tri-dilemma here. The tri-dilemma here has been implicated again, has been excavated again by the COVID situation. See, still some of the countries are suffering with the COVID pandemic, still some of the countries are facing lockdown, and post COVID as well, there has been a lot of economic tensions that has given place. Okay, still the global economy is recovering. The global GDP has not yet reached the pre-COVID era. So all these reasons, okay, all these reasons, that is your food, water, energy, as well as the pre-COVID time, post-COVID time recovery, all these are giving a lot of socio-economic problems. Okay, so these are the implications on the geopolitics here. When we look at what are the implications on India, okay, when we look at what are the implications of India, see the global order, the previous global order before this Ukraine Russia war, what was the previous global order? Was that the US was considered as a global power. US was seen someone as who would balance the balance the crisis, as if there was some imbalance in any geopolitical issue, the US would intervene and it would solve the matter, or it would sort out the matter. But now what has happened is we are moving towards a tripolar world. In this tripolar world, we are seeing that it is US and European Union at one side, we are seeing China and Russia on one side, and to balance this two nations, we have a tripolar world that is emerging, the third party being India and the ASEAN countries, as well as some of the countries like Turkey, as well as South Korea and all, who do not want to get involved in this issue but want to reap the benefit of this issue. Like when we look at India here, okay, when we look at India is being trying to import the Russian oil at cheaper cost. Okay, India is trying to balance the geopolitics here by maintaining good relation with Quad, by maintaining good relation with Russia and China as well. Whereas we are seeing the BRIC summit being happening. Okay, next year we have this G20 summit in India, where both the premiers of China as well as Russia are expected to be in India. Even though we have this issue here, where India has been abstaining from voting in the UNSC when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. Initially, when this war started, India had been supporting the Russia and saying that it is a territorial conflict and it is not a world war here. But right now, when we look at it, India has been abstaining. India has been the external affairs minister has been very vocal, and India has always been saying that we are sovereign nation and it is up to us about what decisions we take. Okay, so India has one more prominent role here. When we look at it, India previously, a few days back, the Prime Minister came out and said that India wants to be a Vishwa Guru. Okay, India wants to be a Vishwa Guru, and to be a Vishwa Guru, India has to take a stand here. And the stand is very clear that India wants to have good relation with every country. India does not want to get involved in any region's conflict, because we as a sovereign nation, sovereignty doesn't mean that we have the freedom to take our own decision. It also means that we should not get involved in any region's matter here. But since this conflict is expanding now that China is seen as directly supporting Russia, and now that NATO has been supplying arms to these countries, NATO has been directly involved and supplying arms to Ukraine. So it has to be seen how India balances this out. To see what India's stance will be, it is very important what will be the theme of the G20 summit that is going to happen next year. What will be the overall picture that and overall statement that India comes out with, because India, see, most of the countries think that India is a small player and India has a lot of debt issue when it comes. But when we look at the debt issue of China and US, it is just a size of a peanut. Okay, India has been developing its own indigenous defense system. We have recently inducted INS Vikramaditya. We have Tejas. Okay, we have been developing the world's fastest supersonic missile in the form of BrahMos along with Russia. So here there are a lot of things that are in play, and India will play a central role when it comes to the world peace as well as the newly established world order in coming days. Fine. So that's all. That is what I wanted to explain in this video. My intention here was not to look into the matter of the how the war is progressing or what will be the result of this war. My intention was to make you understand what are the implications of this war on the world as well as on India here. Fine. So the comment box is on, the chat box is on. If you want to ask any questions or if you have any doubts, you can ask and I'll answer. Okay, that's it then. We are done with this topic. We will be coming up with the daily newspaper analysis that we are doing regularly, as well as the knowledge series will be in continuation. We will meet again in the on the live YouTube live in the on next Sunday. Thank you.